December 1916, a poisoned cake, 4 bullets, and a corpse that refused to stay dead, but the real conspiracy started months before. I've read the autopsy reports. What the physicians found in Grigori Rasputin's body that night defied explanation. A man who'd survived Siberian shamanism, battlefield wounds, and countless assassination attempts was finally laid out on a slab in Petrograd. But the manner of his death, the contradictions in the evidence, the lies told afterward, it's the kind of case that keeps you awake if you let it. Because Rasputin's murder wasn't just about killing one man. It was about saving an empire. Let me take you back. Imperial Russia in 1916 wasn't just failing, it was hemorrhaging. The First World War had drained the treasury and the army. Tsar Nicholas Roman II had made himself supreme commander on the battlefield, which meant he wasn't in Petrograd managing the state. And into that vacuum stepped a man with no title, no official rank, and a grip on power that terrified the aristocracy. Rasputin held one card that mattered above all others, the Tsarevich. The Tsar's son Alexei suffered from hemophilia, a bleeding disorder that meant a simple bruise could become a death sentence. Rasputin claimed he could ease the boy's pain. Whether through hypnosis, faith, or sheer force of personality, the child seemed calmer when Rasputin was near. That made Rasputin indispensable to Tsarina Alexandra, and that made him dangerous to everyone else. By late 1916, Rasputin had become something of a phantom ruler. The Tsarina consulted him on military appointments, government positions, even diplomatic matters. He drank in excess. He kept company with actresses and socialites. Rumors spread, some true, some fabricated, about his behavior in the palaces and bathhouses of the capital. The nobility watched this illiterate Siberian peasant wield influence over the crown, and their patience wore thin. Enter Prince Felix Yusupov, 29 years old, immensely wealthy, connected to the royal family through marriage. Yusupov believed Rasputin was steering Russia toward destruction. He wasn't alone. By December, a loose conspiracy had formed: military men, politicians, aristocrats, all convinced that removing Rasputin might save the dynasty itself. They needed someone to pull the trigger. Yusupov volunteered. The plan was straightforward on the surface. Yusupov would lure Rasputin to his palace under the pretense of meeting a beautiful woman, Yusupov's wife, who was actually away. Rasputin, whose appetites were well known, wouldn't refuse. Once inside, the conspirators would finish him. Simple, clean, deniable, except nothing about Rasputin's death was simple. December 16th, just after midnight, Rasputin arrives at the palace. The conspirators have prepared cakes laced with cyanide. Yusupov watches as the monk eats. Minutes pass, an hour. Rasputin shows no sign of distress. The poison isn't working. Or perhaps, as some claimed later, Rasputin's body had built up an immunity through years of exposure to small doses. Either way, the plan was unraveling. Yusupov loses patience. He produces a revolver. He fires. The shot echoes through the palace. Rasputin falls, but then, and I've read the witness accounts, they're consistent on this point, he gets back up. He crawls toward the stairs, bleeding but moving. A second conspirator, Grand Duke Dmitri, fires again. Then again, and still Rasputin moves. The man seems unkillable. They drag him to the courtyard. They bind his hands. Some accounts say they beat him. Others claim they tried to drown him in the frozen Neva River. The exact sequence, I'll be honest with you, it's lost to conflicting testimonies. What we know, Rasputin's body was thrown into an ice hole. He was supposed to sink into the river and never be found. The conspiracy would be complete. Except the body surfaced. Workers found it days later, tangled in the ice. When the pathologist examined him, the evidence was contradictory. Poison in his stomach, gunshot wounds, signs of drowning, but also, and this is what made people talk, evidence that he'd been alive when he went into the water. The autopsy became a Rorschach test. Believers in the supernatural saw proof that Rasputin was supernatural. Skeptics saw sloppy murder work. The conspirators were arrested, but here's what's fascinating: they were never tried. Yusupov was exiled but kept his title and wealth. Dmitri was sent to the front. The Tsar seemed almost relieved. He didn't want a public trial. He didn't want the details exposed. Rasputin was dead. The problem in the Tsar's mind was solved, except it wasn't. It was the opposite. Rasputin's death didn't save the empire. It accelerated its collapse. Without the monk as a lightning rod for aristocratic rage, the nobility's resentment turned inward, toward the Tsar himself, toward the Tsarina, toward the system that had allowed such a man to hold such power. Within 14 months, revolution erupted. The Tsar abdicated. The entire Romanov dynasty fell. Some historians argue the murder was inevitable, that Rasputin's influence had become so poisonous that someone would have killed him regardless. Others say Yusupov and his conspirators, however well-intentioned, fundamentally misread the situation. They thought removing one man would stabilize the throne. Instead, they removed the only thing keeping the aristocracy united, a common enemy. The truth about Rasputin's murder is this: it wasn't a conspiracy to save Russia. It was a last grasp by a dying aristocracy to maintain control over forces they'd already lost. The poison, the bullets, the ice, those were theater. The real story was about power slipping away from those who'd held it for centuries. Rasputin was simply the most visible symbol of their failure. I've spent years in places where power changes hands violently. I've learned that the conspiracies people remember aren't usually the ones that succeed. They're the ones that fail so spectacularly they reshape history. Yusupov believed he was saving his country. Instead, he became an unwitting architect of its destruction. That's the real murder here, not of one man, but of an entire world. What makes this case endure isn't the supernatural mythology or the contradictory autopsy findings. It's the fundamental human miscalculation, the belief that one death could stop history. Every assassination carries that same delusion. Every conspirator believes the same thing: eliminate the target, save the system. They're almost never right. The Romanovs fell within a year. Rasputin's corpse went into the ground. Yusupov lived into exile, eventually writing memoirs about that December night. He never seemed to grasp the irony that his act of patriotism had become the final nail in the coffin of everything he'd tried to save. History doesn't forgive good intentions, it only records outcomes. Subscribe to stay updated on the conspiracies that rewrote empires. There's a new assassination investigation dropping every week.